Are you having a hard time finding new customers? A lot of folks just like you in the IT and cybersecurity space are in the same situation. And they have embraced a new opportunity to get new clients. They're doing this by growing their online presence and maximizing the power of LinkedIn. How, you ask? I have a tried and tested method called my Cyber Social program. I myself have been on LinkedIn and now have over 3.5 million LinkedIn views, and over on YouTube, I have over 750,000 video views. So I can show you exactly how I have done that so that you can promote your organization and become the authority in your industry. And the best part is, I've done all of this organically without one paid ad. You don't need to waste your money over on Google with pay-per-click ads. Now's the time to establish yourself. Look around. The competition isn't doing it. This is your time to shine online before they do. So if you're ready to start your online journey and future-proof your business, please, down below, click the link and schedule a time for us to have a 45-minute call where I can review the exact methodology of the Cyber Social program. You can also click below to see some of my masterclasses, which will give you quick little snippets of a couple of things you can do right away on LinkedIn that will help with your profile. I hope to see you and hear from you soon. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode. My name is Dana. I will be your host, and today we have Vince Scott back again. Hello, Vince. How are you?
Hello, Dana. How are you? It's great to be here.
I'm glad to have you back. And we're going to talk about something which is a very, very important topic that has not been addressed at all on this channel. Before we get started, why don't you just remind everybody a little bit about you and a little bit about yourself and your company and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. I'm Vince Scott. I'm the founder and CEO of Defense Cybersecurity Group. We are a consulting company focused on the DoD cyber requirements, but we also have knowledge and expertise that goes beyond that, such as what we're going to talk about today in incident response, that we use to help our clients in not only meeting their DoD cybersecurity compliance and regulatory requirements, but also actually be cyber secure. How do we take those things and bring them to companies and use that as a mechanism to found a cybersecurity program that's really going to help reduce the risk at our clients?
Mm-hmm. And today we're going to talk about probably everybody's worst nightmare, and that is going to be how a CMMC's impact in reporting incidents to the Department of Defense. So when you have a little situation and you have to report to the big boys, we're going to talk about that today. So first thing we need to really identify is, what is an incident? What would that be?
Yeah, so I think this is the most critical thing in the entire panoply of incident response stuff, is to define what is an incident. And most people gloss over that definition and they get right into, okay, so what do I do? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't need to define an incident. I just need to know how to respond, and we got to report, we got to do all these things, right? Well, actually, you don't start your response until you've determined there is an incident. And there's a mental process you have to go through to say, that thing over there, that's a problem. That's something that happened. We might call that an event or an actionable event in some cases, depending on the company. When do I get into incident territory? So that is an important thing to understand. And what I find is many companies write down what NIST says, which I think is a good definition for their definition of what's an incident, and then they don't follow it because incidents are scary and we don't have those. So the NIST definition for what is an incident is an occurrence that actually or imminently jeopardizes, without lawful authority, the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of information or an information system, or constitutes a violation or imminent threat of violation of security policies, security procedures, and acceptable use policies. So that says the potential for compromising confidentiality, integrity or availability, or the actual or potential violation of a policy. That's what NIST defines as an incident. So what most companies do is they write that down, and then because incidents, and that's a really low bar in my view. Man, that covers a lot of territory, and I see that all the time. And I was just having with another professional a profound disagreement on incidents only happen every 5 years, and they're the big one. And I call the CEO in and blah, blah. And this actually says you can have middle incidents. And so my recommendation is that you as a company, you need to understand what's an incident. If you're going to write a definition, nothing requires you to use the NIST definition. I recommend it though, but whatever definition you use, you write down, actually use it, right? Have that be something that you intend to follow as your incident definition. So you know when something is an incident and when it's not. And coupled with that, and this is sort of broader incident response stuff, but I recommend that you have levels of incidents. If you use that broad definition, then there are some incidents that most people, well, that's just an event. Well, actually, it meets your definition. So for me, for example, someone gets malware on their endpoint. You know, antivirus picks it up and cleans it. I don't call that an incident. But let's say it doesn't. And that happens fairly often. If you're really watching what's coming out of your antivirus, like enterprise, right? Or your firewall enterprise, they'll say, hey, we saw malware here. We couldn't do anything about it in some cases, right? Antivirus tries to remediate it, but it can't always actually. It fails to remediate it. And it tells you that. Okay, to me, that's an incident because it's a potential compromise of the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of my information and information system. Does it need to be reported to the DoD? Maybe, maybe not. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in there. But having those levels of incident, so what's a minor incident, what's a serious incident, what's a major incident, and what's the board escalating incident. So I like that 4-tiered structure. That's the way I usually do it. We developed that for Procter & Gamble when I built the incident response program there. And I think that's a good model. And, you know, at Procter & Gamble, 95% of all our incidents were in that minor category. And we didn't go crazy, and we didn't tell the CEO, and I didn't have to tell regulators. Of course, DoD regulation really didn't apply to them. But you know, it really was minor. Somebody getting malware on their box is minor. If I have to go clean that up, that's minor. There were others though, right? And we had a graduated scale so that we knew where it sat from a seriousness perspective. And based on each one of those levels, and this is actually required in this 171, who has to be reported to, right? Mm-hmm. When do I have to tell the CEO or the CIO of a major company, right? When do I have to tell law enforcement? When do I have to tell, you know, outside regulators? Those things should be in your incident response plan. And I think that's coupled to your definition of what's an incident.
I think that's a great idea to have the different levels. By far, that's an excellent starting point, because it's also going to, if you can determine, okay, if something is really, really a huge deal, obviously this is who we need to report to. You know, the smaller ones, you know, maybe don't need to report to anybody. But the thing that makes me a little nervous, and I think that is that word potential, that can kind of, I don't want to say it's like anything could almost be potential. Like the idea of getting ransomware on that, you know, on that endpoint. Okay, well, nothing happened. We don't think something could have happened.
Well, yeah, so that's where you have to draw the line, and you have to have judgment on it, right? So I told you about what's my smaller incident? Malware landed on a box and wasn't remediated. So I called it an event if malware landed on a box and immediately got deleted, you know, detected and deleted by the antivirus. An event. But if I had to go do work to fix it, then I called it an incident. That's sort of where my cut line is.
Okay, yeah.
But that's that's not really written into the definitions. And I think individual companies need to understand where their cut line is going to be before I'm going to call something an incident. And I mentioned actionable event. I worked with a Fortune 500 financial services company that said incident was way too scary for executives. they didn't want to have incidents. And so we weren't going, they changed their definition to have actionable events. And then they had a very high bar. The place had to be burning down before they called it an incident, right? It was a choice. I like the low bar because I'm a huge believer in broken windows policing, right? So when we go after the small things and we treat them seriously and we write down that they happen, like incidents have to be recorded, right? And I can look at trends and all that stuff. I think broken windows policing makes my environment much safer and it helps prevent the big one from occurring. Which is why I'm in favor of sticking with the low bar definition, but then actually using it. But that's not for everybody, because for some people, incident is scary. And we want to set a high bar for incidents. And I understand that in corporations today, and I think it's a choice you have to make, but you need to understand where your cut line is for that.
So, okay, so if you're a private sector business that doesn't have to follow any compliance frameworks, that's going to be very different than if you are a government contractor. So let's talk a little bit about when things need to be reported to, let's say the DoD in this situation.
Yeah, so let me move back on what you said a little bit.
Okay.
There is no private sector company in the United States that does not have a legal reporting requirement at some point, because every state has a law about cyber incident reporting that applies to all companies who have employees in the state. So even if you're that completely commercial company, you need to understand when you have a responsibility to report, and you do have some responsibility no matter who you are. Now, for DoD, that's much more definitive, right? So again, the answer to this is actually in the Defense Acquisition Regulation. So it tells you very explicitly when you have to report, right? So when the contractor discovers a cyber incident that affects a covered contractor information system or covered defense information residing therein, so think a system that's got CUI, right? When you discover an incident that impacts a system that has CUI on it, or that affects your ability to perform operationally critical support. So let's say you contractually fly commercial tankers to refuel jets in the Middle East, which happens. There are contractors who fly jets to refuel American fighter planes in the Middle East. That would be operationally critical support. So even if it didn't affect CUI, but you couldn't fly your plane for that, you would still be required to report. And that's actually designated in contracts. It's a really niche requirement for most folks, and not something you generally have to worry about. The contractor shall report, right? So that's the fundamental requirement. If it affects CUI, a system that's got CUI or CUI information, you're required to report that to the Department of Defense.
Here's a quick question. So what overrides what? Does state law override a Department of Defense contract?
No.
It's federal?
So I would say they're overlapping requirements, not contradictory requirements. So the only place that I think there might be a contradiction on this is in a legal hold or a legal investigation. So for, let's say, the Federal Bureau of Investigation comes in and says, you have a problem, but I'm conducting a secret counterintelligence investigation. So I don't want you to report this to the Department of Defense yet, because there's allowances in federal law for not having to report incidents when there's, a law enforcement request. Oh, that would probably get the lawyers involved. That would be a really interesting, hard call, but that's the only one, and I haven't had that happen to me. But that's the only one where I'm aware of where there might be some rub between your regulatory responsibility report and the law. Otherwise, it just would be, oh, and I have to report to the state, primarily because PII was affected, right? So you could have an incident that was, affected PII and it affected controlled and classified information, and you'd have to report to both the DoD and your state regulator.
Are you having a hard time finding new customers? A lot of folks just like you in the IT and cybersecurity space are in the same situation. And they have embraced a new opportunity to get new clients. They're doing this by growing their online presence and maximizing the power of LinkedIn. How, you ask? I have a tried and tested method called my Cyber Social program. I myself have been on LinkedIn and now have over 3.5 million LinkedIn views, and over on YouTube, I have over 750,000 video views. So I can show you exactly how I have done that so that you can promote your organization and become the authority in your industry. And the best part is, I've done all of this organically without one paid ad. You don't need to waste your money over on Google with pay-per-click ads. Now's the time to establish yourself. Look around. The competition isn't doing it. This is your time to shine online before they do. So if you're ready to start your online journey and future-proof your business, please, down below, click the link and schedule a time for us to have a 45-minute call where I can review the exact methodology of the Cyber Social program. You can also click below to see some of my masterclasses, which will give you quick little snippets of a couple of things you can do right away on LinkedIn that will help with your profile. I hope to see you and hear from you soon.
Okay. All right. So then the dreadful day comes and you have to go report it to the DoD. How or where do you report that?
Right. So that is at a place called dibnet.dod.mil. And we'll include the link in the show notes. It comes right out of DFARS 252-204-7012, the cybersecurity clause. And it says you must report it here. It also says that you must have a medium assurance certificate, which is it's a token. I have mine on a little thumb drive. It interfaces with the DoD's PKI infrastructure, but you can buy it commercially. You have to have such a certificate to allow you to report it. And so a typical question I ask of contractors when we're talking about this in the incident response world is, do you have a medium assurance token in order to be able to report this?
That's what I was just going to ask. I was just going to say, well, do people know that they have to have this beforehand? And if they don't have it, how long does it take to get a token so that you can then go and report the incident?
It takes about 30 days to go through the process because they have to verify that you are you and it is linked specifically to you, right? So you got to get them a copy of your passport, and they got to verify it, and there's a process, right? Here is my medium assurance token that I use, that we purchased from a Dent Trust, and that allows me to log into the dibnet.dod.mil portal in order to make a report. Now, if you're caught out and you don't have a token, you can actually phone in a report as well. So if you go to that website, there's a phone number and you can call them and say, hey, I don't have a medium assurance token, but I need to make a report.
Okay.
From a contractual requirements perspective, though, you're actually required in accordance with the regulation to have a medium assurance token. And one of the things under CMMC that we've discussed as assessors is, do I give somebody a not met if they don't have one? Because that's not in NIST 800-171 that you have to have. And it's not in the CMMC list of controls and assessment objectives to check for that. But it is a requirement in the DFARS regulation. So that's an interesting bit of trivia.
So wait a minute. So it's not in one of the NIST requirements. It's not in the CMMC requirements.
No.
Okay.
But it's in the DFARS regulation.
See, this is where people are just going to throw their hands in the air and say, well, forget this. I can't do it. I mean,
I agree with you. I think that we should not go there. And in fact, that has been what I advocate in the assessor community. We are not charged with assessing DFARS.
okay.
That's a deep rabbit hole that we should not go down. And in fact, but it was a point of discussion here recently about, well, if they don't have a medium assurance token, then they're not met. And I'm like, no, that's not in what we've been told to assess for. Now, if DoD turns to CMMC and says, I want you to include the DFARS 7012 requirements as sort of back to the Delta 20, right? As additional requirements that we're going to check for under CMMC, even though they're not 171, they're all in that same clause. And we want you to check for those. Okay. And they adjust the assessment guides to do that. And that's a known written requirement that, we can point everybody to. Great. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but as long as it's not written down in our assessment guides as directive for us to go look for and assess against, I'm not in favor of us going down that road.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, I'm glad to hear, and you and I have talked about this before, that the assessors are really trying to do a good job of having an area that they can communicate to each other. So that way everybody is kind of on the same page. And I think that that's, as we all would think, that that's very important, so that, somebody's not being too stringent, somebody's not, being not stringent enough. So I, again, applaud you for you guys having all.
Yeah, that is the C3PAO forum. I participate in that pretty actively. But really, Amira Armand deserves full credit, and some of the other leadership, Scott Singer and some others who actually make that run, Kevin Wheeler. There are some other people who are leadership in that forum who really, are doing an outstanding job giving of their time to contribute to the greater community and try and herd the cats into a single direction. So kudos on them for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give back opportunity that they've made.
Yeah. Great. We need them to do that. Appreciate it very much. Okay, so now we've done this. We've either called them or put the key in. Then, now what else do we have to do? Is there anything else we need to do?
Well, before we move on to need anything else, do we need to do? I want to caveat one more thing. We went back to that definition. And I read it about covered defense information system. So you can have an incident that does not impact a covered defense information system or covered defense information. That's a determination you have to make. And one of the things I recommend that people put in their incident response plan. So you need to have your incident definition, and then you need to have a reportable definition. When do I have to report? Because it's not all circumstances, not all incidents need to be reported. And I've heard a number of people say that. That's not actually true. Incidents have to be reported when they have to be reported, right? When the regulation requires me to report. So I think it's important for companies to have in there, when do I need to report to the DoD? And we also talked about the DoD is not the only place you are going to be responsible for reporting in some instances. State law. Are you covered by SEC reporting guidelines? And those reporting guidelines are being updated. Do you have manufacturing plants in Europe? And you're covered by a thing called GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, which is a very different approach from US law on how you approach privacy and personally identifying information. There's responsibilities to report in that. So I think it's very important for companies. Have your incident definition, but then you need to know what's a reportable incident, when, and to who. You should lay that out, right? So I have reporting responsibilities legally to the following things, and here's when I have to report to them. The DoD may only be one. You may have contractual reporting responsibilities. I've seen this in the DIP. Big prime contractor wrote into your contract that when you have a problem with their proprietary information, you have a reporting responsibility to them. That's an additional contractual requirement. So it's important to understand when you have to report and to who, and then, okay, a big prime you put in the contract, I have to report to you. Who do I call? Where's that website? How does that work? Do you have that? You know, work through that. Maybe that's part of your incident response exercise. But you definitely need to hone that. What's a reportable incident when? In order to make the decision on when to report, because executives, everybody hates to report to the DoD and the FBI and the government. That's not something you're going to want to do. So you need to have that in your definitions. You need to know what you're talking about when you're going in with the CEO and saying, hey, we have a problem. Here's our responsibility report, etc. You need to have your ducks in a row. Do that in your incident response plan.
Yeah, that sounds like a very, very, very good thing to proactively put together a list of everything and anyone with contact information, websites, phone numbers of, when something goes wrong, this is who we're going to have to reach out to, because that's not something you're going to want to be scrambling around trying to, especially if you have to go talk to the CEO and tell him, and then they say, well, who do we need to call? And you're like, hold on, let me go find out, so.
Right. Well, and that's a great thing for an exercise too. I always try to exercise to make people think through that process. And that's also helpful if you're setting up your annual incident response exercise. Most people do it annually. I want to get the top executives there, and I want to make them think through, hey, Mr. CEO, you may have to report to your DoD overlords that you've had a problem. How are you going to do that? How are you going to be prepared? How do you want your company to be positioned when you do that? I think it's very valuable to have them think through that in an exercise before the actual moment occurs, and you got to do it, because then it's even scarier.
Absolutely. I'm glad we just went over that whole thing thinking outside of just the DoD with who you need to contact, because that's obviously very important. All right. So after we do that, so now is there anything else we need to do? Absolutely.
So the first thing you need to do is you've got to investigate. So, hey, I think I might have had a problem. DoD, have a nice day. That's not going to work well. You actually have to investigate and try to figure out what happened, what your root cause analysis is. Hey, and that can be very challenging. You may need to call someone in, an outside forensics firm, et cetera, particularly when it involves DoD information, to really drive that home. You probably don't have that expertise in-house unless you're a very large company. Generally, you're going to call somebody to come do that. It's another part of your incident response exercise is decide, when would I call for help? Do I have cybersecurity insurance? Do they have a preferred vendor for this that I need? I need an in-network provider in order to be able to get my insurance for this.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the types of things to work through in your incident response exercise, right? The second thing, DFARS actually has a requirement for you to preserve all media and potential evidence for 90 days in case the DoD wants to come look at that. So don't delete logs. If you normally delete logs after 30 days, you're supposed to put a hold on deleting logs so you can keep them. Don't throw away those hard drives. Don't, that sort of thing. That is written in DFAR 7012, and we'll have the specifics of that in the show notes so you can look at it. But that's another thing you'll need to do is preserve evidence. And then the third thing here is submit malware found. So if you actually do see malware as a part of this, the DoD wants you to send that to them, and they have a very specific process via the DivNet portal and your medium assurance token to go do that. And that's actually also a requirement in the regulation.
Okay. That's good. That makes sense. It's not just like, whew, okay, great. We called them. Now we're done.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And then let's see, what else do we need to do? We talked about submitting the malware that we find. So what does the DoD do to me when I report? Now, are you marked on like the bad kid list?
Yeah. So what does the DoD do to me when I report? I think that's the biggest fear. I don't know that fear is totally unfounded, but in general, it's not as bad as you think. I have had to report major incidents to the Department of Defense 3 times in my career so far. And in 2 of the times they largely didn't react at all, and the 3rd time it's been relatively minor. I mean, from a coming in, shutting the company down, grabbing a whole bunch of stuff, having major business impact, that generally is not the approach that the Department of Defense is taking. They do want to know. They want to know what happens. They want to see their forensics report that you had somebody do if you do, hire a forensics firm. They want root cause analysis. They want to understand if you fixed it. And they want to know if you identified CUI that was impacted, what contracts could that potentially be a part of? And then your contracting officer is also notified by DoD.
Okay, so it's not the end of the world, but
Yeah, the further out that gets, I think contracting officers are probably a lot less familiar with that, and potentially could see that negatively from a company. Hey, you got hacked, so you're bad. I work really hard with the department whenever I can, and various entities, that we can't punish companies for reporting like they should. And largely, I think that's realized across the senior administration, the federal government, and particularly the cybersecurity professional areas. They realize that we punish the victim of a crime, which is really what this is. When somebody hacks you, that's a federal crime, right? So punishing the federal, punishing me because I let myself get mugged, right?
Right.
It is probably not the way to go, right? So outside of that professional cyber community, though, that's probably less well understood and appreciated. So it's an important education point. And if a contracting officer were to ask hard questions about that, I think it would be incumbent upon the company to have good answers about, hey, we have a program, we identified a problem, we executed in accordance with that program, we reported appropriately, etc. We are one of all of the companies in the United States that's been hacked so far. Okay, here's what happened. And really the important part is how you react to being hacked. There is no preventing being hacked, right? I know cybersecurity professionals that talk about 2 kinds of companies, those who've been hacked and those who just don't know it yet, right? So, but that's an important education point for perhaps your contracting officers or government people who want to freak out about that. It doesn't mean I did anything wrong. It doesn't mean I'm not following the regulations and acting as a good steward of the DoD's information. It just means the bad guys got me. And in the current world where I always talk about, we have Tom Brady pro offenses playing against college club sport defenses, right? The director of the FBI said this the other day, that the Russian cyber corps is bigger than all of his agent workforce, right? So as a business, right, I maybe have a person who's doing cybersecurity or a couple of people, if I'm not a big company. We're playing against the North Korean cyber army, right? 6,000 men estimated. Okay, I mean, I can work on this, and I can try to be not the slowest gazelle in the field, but they're still lions and I'm still gazelle, right? There's just no way around. So I think it becomes an education point. And what you don't want to do is have someone from the outside, like the FBI, call you and tell you you have a problem, and then you have no workforce or no program, right? You really aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you really have been ignoring this cyber crap. And now you potentially have a problem, because if you try to do the right thing, it becomes obvious that really you're not doing what you were supposed to be doing. So it is actually important to follow the regulation. That's part of the cyber is risk reduction. You're reducing the risk that, 1, you'll ever get a phone call, and 2, if you do, you can say we're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing as part of that.
What you just said about the Tom Brady offense and the college
Club sport.
defense, that's terrifying. That is terrifying that's what's happening. And I know you're right, but
that is where we're at, right? That we have Tom Brady pro offenses. We have foreign nation states with the equivalent of, their equivalents of NSA, who probably aren't as good as we are. But maybe they're who got the number 1 draft pick last night? I don't remember. The Jacksonville Jaguars or whoever. Maybe they're not the Patriots when Tom Brady played for them. Maybe they're the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Cleveland Browns. I'm sorry if you're a Jag.
No, we wanted Will Levis because he's from Connecticut. He went to one of the schools that some of my kids went to.
Yeah, but they're still pros, right? Those are still pro teams that you're playing against. And really, on the defensive side, you're a business. You're delivering business products and services. You're professionalized in that. You're generally not professionalized in cyber. That's not your core business. And so it's very, very challenging for companies, I think, to play defense against very professional offenses.
Mm-hmm.
And if they really want you, they can get you. It's another part of the reason why, from a real cybersecurity perspective, you can't be satisfied that I checked all my little boxes for CMMC or 171. Hey, we've done all the compliance stuff, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not every day. I presume that we're hacked in some way, and we look at our total approaches. Yeah, they probably can get in. So what are we doing to identify that? What are we doing to stop them? What are we doing to better secure our information? How can I be better tomorrow than I am today? And trying to continuously hone that information security, cybersecurity enterprise. Cybersecurity is something you do every day. It's not a checklist that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's critical to have that cybersecurity operational mindset, I think, in this incident response.
Yeah, and we need a lot more of that mindset throughout this country. Oh, well, this was very, very, very helpful. I mean, this is great. I'm so happy that we actually took a minute to stop and think, okay, well, now something's happened. Now, what do you do with that information? So I really appreciate, I know you're a whiz at this stuff.
And my website link, www.cybersecurity.com, will be in the show notes. If anybody has any clarifying questions or wants to reach out to us, please feel free. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you coming back, and of course, want to have you back again. So we'll have to pick another great topic to scare everybody with.
I've got a list. We look forward to it.
I'm sure you do. Well, thank you very, very much, Vince. I appreciate this.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Till next time. See you soon. Bye-bye.